Let's go, folks! Today we're going to be looking at a deck I've been tinkering with called Tinkering with Iron Man. It is a Rocket Raccoon deck, and the purpose of this deck is to get Iron Man into play and then use some of his abilities to get upgrades on him so you can tinker them off. But this deck is not for beginners, I'll just say that, because of the high level of cognitive ability. You got to be able to manage a lot of things. In particular, you got to be checking a lot of criteria because you got to meet a lot of criteria in order to make this deck work. And so I'll go through some of that today as I explain this deck. And this isn't necessarily like an original idea. I know other people have got decks very similar to this, but this is the one I've been playing with and trying to fine-tune how I like it. And so this is what I've come up with. And so let me explain how it works. So ultimately, the objective of this deck is to get Iron Man into play. So of course, you're going to have the Iron Man ally. And his ability says reduce the cost for each upgrade played on Iron Man by 1. So essentially, that makes playing upgrades on Iron Man free. He is an Avenger ally and not a Guardian ally. But we want to make him a Guardian as quick as we possibly can. So we've also included over here in our upgrades the Honorary Guardians. We've included 3 of those because we want to make sure we see those a lot in our deck. And we really need him to be a Guardian in order for this to work anyways. So how do we get him in play? Is we're going to get him in play by hard Mulligan. We don't want to keep anything that's not a double resource or a call for aid. See, because call for aid allows you to go find an Avenger ally. And since he's the only Avenger ally in our deck, he's going to be the one we find. This, by the way, is a hero action. That's important because you have to be in hero form to use this card. That's something that can be forgotten in this deck. That's one of the little tidbits of this deck that requires high level of cognitive weight that you're carrying as you're managing your board and managing what's going on, but it's not the only thing you have to manage. Also, in order for us to be able to trigger and get a lot of card draw, we have the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, this requires all of your characters to be Guardians. This is important because Rocket is only naturally a Guardian on one side of his card. And that's his hero side. On the other side, he's an outlaw. So we're going to want to get this Honorary Guardian also on Rocket. So when we trigger Guardians of the Galaxy support, we are a Guardian no matter what form that we're in. And as an added element of cognitive thought process, to play your first Honorary Guardian, you have to be in hero form. So you cannot play Honorary Guardian on yourself in Alter Ego. You have to flip up to hero form before playing this on yourself or playing this on Iron Man. So again, there's a lot of moving bits and pieces here. And then the next thing we want to be aware of is we're going to be putting a lot of upgrades onto Iron Man. So we have Comms Implant, but you'll see that this is attached to a Guardian ally only. So you're going to have to keep that in mind and why it's so important to make him a Guardian, because some of these things don't work unless he's a Guardian. So Comms Implant, and then the Laser Blaster also requires him to be Guardian. But then, on top of that, he has Power Gloves, which he can have because he's an Avenger ally, and Sky Cycle, which he can have because he's an Avenger ally. So you have to keep some of those things in mind, but it also means that Sky Cycle and Power Gloves can't go on any of your other allies. So let's take a look at some of the other allies we have. We have Groot. He's there because he's a Guardian. Again, you can't play Groot in Alter Ego unless you already put an Honorary Guardian on yourself. But as long as you have the Guardian identity trait, or a trait on your identity, you can play Groot. But his main purpose is to heal, to stay on the board and block for you. Because Rocket is going to be taking a lot of damage while he tries to build. And so Groot being on the board allows you to have a blocker to take some of that damage. Up next, we have Major Victory. Major Victory works really well as not only a blocker early game, but also you can use his last activation to defeat him and ready a Guardian character. So that could be Iron Man, but probably is going to be Rocket Raccoon. So you can thwart with Rocket and then use Major Victory's last activation to ready yourself to thwart again, because the threat can definitely pile up. But Rocket can deal with it with some of these neat combos that we have there. And if he's already played one of his events of I've Got a Plan, he even has increased stats on his thwarting. Next, we have Martin X, who is really there because he's a cheap ally. And again, he only gets to reduce the 1 cost if your identity has the Guardian trait. So you have to be in hero form, or you have to have already attached that Honorary Guardian to yourself. So again, that's another level of cognitive weight that's going on in this deck building. But essentially, he's a 2-cost ally for Rocket, which is really good. And having that 4 health really gets a lot of activations out of him. But in a pinch and you have to block with him, it's not that big of a deal because you only played 2 for him, and 2-cost allies for blocking purposes is actually a really good trade-off. The next thing we get here is our first aid. That's important because we're going to want to keep continuing to heal Iron Man to get those extra activations out of him. When I first built this deck, I completely forgot to add these, and I was like, oh no, there's no way for me to heal Iron Man and continue to keep him on the board. And so these first aids, 3 of them there, because they never go to waste. I mean, the worst case scenario, you spend it as a resource, or you use it to heal Rocket. So these cards you definitely want to see a lot just to make sure you're never in a situation where you're about to lose Iron Man. Flora and Fauna is in this pack because if you can get Groot on the board and keep him on the board, it's going to help you with those upgrades and getting extra activations as your upgrades, because ultimately the goal is to create a bunch of card draw with this deck. So when you get a bunch of card draw, it allows you to get a bunch of weapons onto the board, and it creates a really cool opportunity for a massive turn at the end of the game where you got a huge burst of damage because you have all your upgrades out, which makes reload really cool because you can save a lot of those charge counters on them. You use them when you have to, but you can kind of collect them throughout the game with your battery packs and whatnot in order to get that big boost with your reload. And then speaking of our weapons, we have side holster, which allows us to have an additional weapon, so you can have one of your pistols and both of your big guns in play. And then when you're ready, all of them, and you can have a massive reload turn to blast. That's great. And so you're definitely going to be using this battery pack a lot, and then you'll be using your salvage to get those battery packs back on top of your deck a lot of times to really increase the ammo that you have. Now, one of the reasons why this deck really works is because he has this salvage double resource card in his hero kit, making it easier to play Iron Man, because sometimes it's hard to play a 4-cost ally, and that definitely helps. Then we have Nowhere, and really this card is there because I got into a situation where I just wanted to be able to get my 4th ally out, and I didn't have any more spots left. But also, it's card draw. And so every time you play one of these one of these 3 Guardian guys, you get an extra card, which is kind of the synergy of this deck, is to be getting a bunch of card draw. So once you get Guardians of the Galaxy out, you can start plopping your upgrades on the Iron Man, drawing cards off that. Then you can get some of these other allies out and plop other upgrades on them. Then when you go down to Alter Ego, you can tinker off some of these tech upgrades, from comms implant to laser blaster to even reinforced suit. Tinker those things off in order to get your card draw, and then throw it right back on, which will get you another card draw from the Guardians of the Galaxy support. So that is ultimately what you're going to be trying to do with this deck, is to create a bunch of card draw to build up to a massive turn where you have all your guns on the board and you can really blast the villain there at the end, which is a lot of fun, especially using Schadenfreude, where you got 1 health and then you can just heal up real quick with this deck because you'll have all your upgrades out there. So health early game becomes an issue, but mid to late game, you can heal with Schadenfreude and have a lot of fun. So that's the deck. That's the plan. Again, a lot of cognitive things you're going to have to carry, a lot of weightiness going on in the mind just to double check and triple check the criteria is met. But I've been having a lot of fun with this deck, and I hope you do as well.